Welcome back to the GCN Racing News Show. Coming up this week, a look at the UAE Team Emirates Tour de France squad, which looks like one of the strongest teams ever assembled at the race. But is it? I'll be doing a breakdown of their roster, as well as wrapping up the Tour de Suisse, men's and women's, Baloise Belgium Tour, Tour of Slovenia, Giro Next Gen, and the Tour de Pyrenees. This week in the world of racing, we learned that Emil Herzog of Bora Hansgrohe pulls no punches when it comes to encouraging a breakaway companion to share the workload.
Go to the front, I'll drop you!
That was poor Mathieu Burgodeau on the receiving end, who I don't think could go through at that point in the race. We also learned that it's not just track riders who use banking to get around corners.
Let's have a look. This is Samson here.
Yeah, Samson. Yeah.
That was Andy Sampson of the Ljubljana Gusto Santic team, saving his skin at the Tour of Slovenia. Meanwhile, at the Tour of Suisse, there was almost another dog of the pro peloton.
Let's have a look at this corner. Whoa, madam, take your schnitzel back somewhere else. Goodness me.
Mark Hirschi forced to take evasive action there on a day that didn't work out for him or for UAE Team Emirates, but my word did it work out for them over the remainder of the race. Alongside the Criterium du Dauphiné, the Tour de Suisse is the big preparation race for the Tour de France, and whilst Vingegaard and Pogačar raced neither this year, for entirely different reasons, it did serve to show us that the Slovenian's team is more than ready to support him at the Tour. Adam Yates and Joao Almeida went 1-2 on stages 6, 7 and 8, and on the general classification. So, 2 stage wins each, and never once did they look like they were going to be threatened by any of the other riders in the race. So it was an ominous message to all of their rivals at the upcoming Tour de France, which starts in just 12 days' time. The closest to them was last year's Tour de Suisse winner, Matthias Schellmoser of Lidl Trek. He finished just over 3 minutes down on Yates on the GC. Egan Bernal of Ineos Grenadiers was a further 10 seconds back, having lost a position in the final time trial. Pidcock was over 4.5 minutes down, Enric Mas over 5 minutes down, whilst the best Visma Lease bike rider was Wilco Kelderman in 9th. Outside of those bigger names, the most promising ride of the week was that of Matthew Riccatello of Israel Premier Tech. The 22-year-old finished 5th overall and just 30 seconds off the final podium. Now, he isn't provisionally down to ride the Tour de France this year, but it would be lovely to see him do it, wouldn't it? Back to UAE though, and let's go through their Tour de France roster for this year. Pogačar will lead, of course. Mountain lieutenants are Almeida, Yates and Ayuso, all of whom could lead other teams in their own right. Sivakov and Soler provide further ammunition over all terrain, whilst Wellens and Pollitt will be the protectors on the flat and hilly terrain. Between those 7 helpers, they've had 11 wins this year, the majority of which have come at World Tour level. Now, I guess there's a bit of a question mark over Juan Ayuso, in that he was involved in that high-speed crash at the Dauphiné, sustaining injuries bad enough to force him to abandon. However, if we look back at last year, his early season was severely affected with injury, but he still got back to winning ways pretty much as soon as he started competing again. Adam Yates showed last year how good he was in a support role, doing everything he could for Pogačar while still winning a stage and finishing on the podium himself. Almeida looks as good as I've ever seen him. His steady but very high tempo in the mountains will help defend the lead if they're in that situation, or to set up attacks if they're not. Pollitt is a machine on the flat. That guy has some serious horsepower, but I think he'll be thankful and probably quite relieved to have Tim Wellens alongside him to share the workload there. And then you've got Soler and Sivakov, both of whom are very solid, dependable riders, capable of winning on the bid stage in their own right. But there is a big difference between a set of strong individuals and a strong team. Some people have been questioning which best describes the UAE Tour de France squad, pointing to a lack of cohesion amongst teammates at some races. However, those are races in which Pogačar has been absent. When he's on the team, everybody knows who the leader is. I don't remember a single race in which there's been any kind of infighting at that team when Pogačar has been on the start line. Such is his level, everybody knows their place. I mean, that's not to say that one of the others can't step up to the mark if Pogačar crashes or gets ill or isn't at 100%, but until that point, I don't see any of the riders rebelling and looking after their own interests. I mean, it would be great from an entertainment point of view if they did. Who doesn't love a bit of drama? But I just can't see it. That's not to say, of course, that they're going to have it all their own way. As we all know, anything can happen in the world of pro cycling, particularly at the Tour de France, and there will be a bunch of riders and teams looking to take advantage of any weakness shown by UAE. So what then about defending champions Visma Lease bike? Well, it looks like there might be some positive news from that cab. We still haven't had confirmation yet as to whether or not Jonas Vingegaard will be at the start in Florence, but an Instagram post from Matteo Jorgensen and a Strava upload from Wout van Aert painted quite a positive picture. The photo showed the two of them alongside Tish Benoot, Jan Tratnik, Christophe Laporte, and most importantly, Jonas Vingegaard himself. The ride itself was a whopper, 180 Ks, 7 hours, and with over 5,000 metres of elevation gain. Now, I've made the presumption that all of them completed that ride, and if they did, that is a very good sign for Vingegaard. I'd also be quite surprised if they'd posted a picture like that if Vingegaard wasn't going to race in France this year, or at least that's what I'm hoping. Now, one of the key riders missing from that photo is Sepp Kuss. He abandoned the Dauphiné with illness, so perhaps he's still recovering from that. So what do you reckon then? Can UAE be beaten this year, given what we've seen from them and their rival teams so far in 2024? And do you see any problems arising with team hierarchy over the course of the Tour de France? You can let me know in the comments section down below. Just before I move on, you may have noticed I'm sporting a brand new t-shirt today, which is part of our new collection to honour the biggest race of them all. So if you head over to shop.globalcyclingnetwork.com, you'll find our complete French collection range with 25 different t-shirt designs to choose from, plus hoodies, a special edition GCN Camelback water bottle, and a French-themed mug. As ever, your support makes the world of difference to us in enabling us to continue making free-to-view content. And incidentally, our big Tour de France preview show will be out for you next week with a detailed look at all of the stages and the major riders taking part, so stay tuned for that. On to the other races from last week now, and I'm going to start with the Tour of Belgium. Before I get on to the GC, I'm going to start by talking about the big sprinters battle between Jasper Philipsen and Tim Merlier. Now, I've been saying since about February that Merlier is staking claim to being the fastest sprinter in the world right now, and in my opinion, he underlined that in Belgium last week. Of the 3 bunch sprints, he won 2 of them quite comfortably, whilst Jasper Philipsen took the other one on a day when Merlier found himself boxed in. So it means that Merlier is now on 12 victories so far in 2024. That's just 2 behind Pogačar, 4 ahead of Pedersen, and 8 in front of Jasper Philipsen. Philipsen will now head to the Tour de France, where he won 4 stages and the green jersey last year. But unfortunately, it's highly unlikely that Merlier will be there. His team Soudal Quickstep is built entirely around Remco Evenepoel this year, leaving no space for him, which is understandable, but also a real shame. He is clearly on the form of his life at the moment, and it would have been a treat for us to see him use that at the biggest race of them all. On the plus side for Philipsen, even in the absence of Mathieu van der Poel, there were a couple of textbook lead-outs from his team. I'm going to focus on stage 3, where they had a headwind finish. So Alpecin de Koning could afford to come up late, and that's exactly what they did there. If we pause it here on the overhead shot, you can count at least 30 riders that are in front of Philipsen and his team. Jonas Rickard makes it look easy as he goes past every single one of them down the left-hand side, and then he still has enough power left to get out of the saddle and continue his lead-out. He drops Roy Geeshoff with just under 400 metres to go, who in turn delivers Philipsen to 200. From there, it was plain sailing from the Belgium all the way to the finish line. And that really highlights the importance of timing and also planning for certain conditions. You also have to have the rider to be able to do it, of course, and that team most certainly has. The GC there was decided by bonus seconds plus the opening individual time trial. Uno X's Søren Varenshoel blitzed around the 12Ks at an average speed of 53.7 Ks per hour, putting him 2 seconds in front of Matthias Vacek of Lidl Trek. And those two were a fair way in front of everybody else. Varenshoel took a full 9 bonus seconds on the golden kilometre of stage 3, putting him 11 seconds in front on GC. But Vacek turned the tables the following day, reducing it back down to the original 2 seconds. And gaining a further 2 seconds on the final stage though, Varenshoel put the GC out of reach of Vacek, who just missed out on 3rd place and the 4 bonus seconds that would have come with that on the final stage. Vacek, though, seriously impressive, isn't he? That lad's got a very bright future. The only road stage that wasn't a bunch sprint came on day 4, the hilliest of the race. Alex Aramburu of Movistar took his first win there in almost 2 years, out-sprinting Pierre Gauthierat to the line. Going back to Belgian stars, a brand new one emerged at the Giro Next Gen last week. Jarno Vida of Lotto Destiny was the second youngest rider on the start line, turning 18 last November, but he showed some far more experienced riders how it's done by taking 2 stage wins and the general classification. It makes him the youngest ever winner of that race, and to put his age into some sort of context, he's younger now than Mathieu van der Poel was when he won the Junior World Championships. Now that's because of the differing ends of the year in which they were born. Anyway, as you can imagine, Belgian cycling media is now in a frenzy about the prospect of this young man, as they probably should be. That was quite the performance. What an exciting future he's got ahead of him. At the Women's Tour de Suisse, 2 of the 4 stages have been completed as we record this, and it was a familiar story in both. Demi Vollering may have had a slightly slower start to the season this year, but there's no doubt she's up to full speed now. On the same shortened stage that the men had on Saturday, she finished 22 seconds up on Gaia Riolini, whilst in yesterday's individual time trial, the margin was 18 seconds over Elisa Longo Borghini. It means that from her last 10 days of racing, she's had 9 wins, including 2 general classifications, and it would take a very brave person to bet against her taking a 3rd this coming Tuesday. You can watch the rest of that race on Discovery+, where you'll also be able to watch the French, Italian, Spanish and British national championships later on this week, some of which will also be available on Max over in the US. Meanwhile, at the Tour of Slovenia, Giovanni Aleotti had the biggest 2 wins of his career so far. Before the race started, his only pro wins had come at the Sibiu Cycling Tour, but he changed that on stage 3, attacking in the closing stage of the race and crossing the line 11 seconds in front of the rest. That propelled him into the overall lead, which he defended admirably on the Queen stage the following day, which was won by Peo Bilbao. Second on that stage was Paul Double of Polti Cometa, and what a climbing talent that lad is. It'll be great to see him get a chance to perform at the biggest races. Dylan Groenewegen and Phil Bauhaus won the opening 2 sprint stages, whilst Ben Healy's relentless attacking finally rewarded him with victory on the 5th and final stage. At the Tour of the Pyrenees, Usoa Ostolaza of the Laboral Kutcher team took the first 2 wins of her career. Stage 2 of the race plus the overall classification. Vittoria Guazzini and Josie Talbot won stages 1 and 3 respectively. I'm going to check in now with team wins so far this year. UAE Team Emirates 4-stage wins at the Tour de Suisse put them up to 43 in total so far this year. That's 16 ahead of Lidl Trek and 19 ahead of Decathlon AG2R. The gulf with women's teams, though, is even greater. It looked like SD Works may have lost some of their dominance in the Spring Classics, but they've run away with things since. They sit on 35 wins thus far, with Lidl Trek second on 11. In other news, there was a record 36th World Cup win for Nino Schurter in the XCO in Val di Sole at the weekend, whilst Pauline Ferrand-Prévot won the women's. There were also rumours last week that the French woman will be leaving Ineos Grenadiers at the end of this season and signing a 3-year deal with Visma Leasebike, which would be a real coup for them. There are a few injuries to report from the Tour de Suisse. Amongst them, a broken hand for Nairo Quintana of Movistar and a broken hip and collarbone for Emmanuel Buchmann of Bora Hansgrohe. We wish them both the best in their recovery. And likewise, best wishes to Ashley Moolman-Pasio, who unfortunately is out of the Giro Donne due to a back injury sustained at the Vuelta Catalunya. The Grand Départ of the 2025 Tour de France Femmes will take place in Bretagne, northwestern France. It's going to be a 9-day event next year and back to its traditional time slot, basically overlapping and just post the men's race. It's from the 26th of July through to the 3rd of August. Mark Cavendish was awarded a knighthood on the King's Birthday Honours list last week for services to cycling and charity work. That means he will soon be Sir Mark Cavendish, whilst Chris Bourbon received an MBE for services to active travel. Cesare Benedetti is set to hang up his wheels after a 15-year pro career. His final race will be the Tour of Poland this year, after which he'll turn his attention to being a DS at his current team Bora Hansgrohe. And finally, there's a new race on the men's and women's World Tour calendar for next year. There weren't many changes on the list released by the UCI last week, but a new one-day race in Copenhagen is welcome news not only for Danish fans, but for all fans of cycling. We all remember the crowds in the Danish Grand Départ a couple of years ago, don't we? Which were absolutely insane. Right, thanks as ever for watching, everyone. I'll be back next week to wrap up the National Championships taking place, so I will see you then.